we're going to go ahead and get started this afternoon. I want to thank all of you very, very much for coming today. My name is Ken Walsh. I'm the Dean of San Diego State University in Georgia. And we are very grateful to you for taking time today to come out and to hear what I think will be a very interesting presentation about climate change and its interaction with disease. I'd like to take just a moment, if I could, to offer a few thank yous. We have representatives today from the Millennium Challenge Corporation and from the Millennium Challenge Account for Georgia. I'm grateful to you for coming. We have faculty and other representatives of the partner universities. I'll tell you more about that in a moment. We have a number of professors and experts and other colleagues, and even more importantly, students and potential students for SDSU Georgia. You are hopefully the beneficiaries of this program and the ones for whom all this work will prove to have been valuable, and we're really grateful to you for coming. Maybe you can think of it as a sort of a sneak preview of the instruction that you'll be receiving come September. So, speaking for San Diego State University, let me just tell you that we are very, very excited, very glad to be here in Georgia and have this unique opportunity to offer American degrees right here in Tbilisi, and through those degrees to allow students to become leaders in the STEM disciplines. Starting here in 2015, thanks to an agreement with the government of Georgia in 2014, and with financial support from the Millennium Challenge Corporation and MCA Georgia, we'll be offering high-quality, internationally accredited U.S. degrees in STEM fields starting here this September. This year we'll be offering over 150 scholarships to students, and we hope that many of you who are here today will take the advantage to visit our website and apply for those. We're very, very excited to be working in partnership with 3 Georgian universities, Tbilisi State University, Ilia State University, and Technical University, where our degrees will be offered and in partnership with whom we'll be delivering instruction. A key thing I want to point out, Dr. Malloy is going to be speaking about his research efforts, and a very important part of this whole project is to identify and develop research collaborations with our Georgian faculty colleagues that will lead to research that can impact Georgia and the world. So today, the Dean of our College of Sciences, Dr. Stanley Malloy, will be speaking on climate change and how it affects disease transmission around the world and how it affects our population. This is the first of what we hope will be a long series of public lectures. And we believe that lectures like this can help increase the awareness of the importance of the sciences, technology, engineering, and mathematics, or the STEM fields in Georgia, and facilitate dialogue amongst the civil society and amongst our colleagues. So I encourage you to keep an eye on our Facebook page. Please like us on Facebook at San Diego State University, Georgia, and watch our website at georgia.sdsu.edu. I would like to take just a moment and introduce Magda Magradza, who's the CEO of MCA Georgia, who will add a few words of welcome.
Ათასწლეულის გამოწვევის ფონდის საქართველოს სახელი. ჩვენთვის დიდი პატივია, რომ ჩართულები ვართ აღნიშნულ პროექტში და ინიციატივაში, რომ სან დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის საქართველოს წარმომადგენლობამ საფუძველი ჩაუყარა საჯარო ლექციების ახალ ციკლს. ეს გახლავთ პირველი ლექცია მოგეხსენებათ და იმედი გვაქვს, რომ აღნიშნული ლექციებით კიდევ უფრო გაიზრდება ინტერესი სან დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის საქართველოს პროგრამებისადმი. აღნიშნული პროექტი სან დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის საქართველო მოგეხსენებათ ხორციელდება ათასწლეულის გამოწვევის კორპორაციის მეორე კომპაქტის ფარგლებში. აღნიშნული კომპაქტი გახლავთ ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატების მთავრობის დახმარება საქართველოს. ძირითადი მისია და მიზანი ამ კომპაქტისა გახლავთ ის, რომ საქართველოში განვითარდეს საბუნებისმეტყველო საინჟინრო სპეციალობებში პროფესიონალები და ასევე ტექნოლოგიაში სპეციალისტები. სან-დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტის საქართველოს პროექტი გახლავთ ჩვენი უმაღლესი განათლების პროექტი, რომელიც 30 მილიონი ამერიკული დოლარით ფინანსდება ათასწლეულის გამოწვევის კომპაქტის ფარგლებში. როგორც პროფესორმა ვოლშმა აღნიშნა, აღნიშნულ პროექტს შარშან ჩაეყარა საფუძველი, ხელი მოეწერა ურთიერთთანამშრომლობის მემორანდუმს საქართველოს მთავრობასა და სან-დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტს შორის, რომელიც მოიცავს 20 წლიან პერიოდს და ეს გახლავთ ნამდვილად უნიკალური და ისტორიული, შეიძლება ითქვას, ინიციატივა, რომელსაც მხარს უჭერენ ჩვენი ამერიკელი მეგობრები. მე მინდა მივესალმო პროფესორ მალოის, რომელიც გახლავთ ძალიან კარგი, არაჩვეულებრივად კარგი გამომსვლელი. მე შევსწრები ვარ მის არაერთ გამოსვლას და ჩვენთვის დიდი პატივია დღეს, რომ გვაქვს საშუალება მას მოусმინოთ. ასევე უნდა აღინიშნოს, რომ სტენლი გახლავთ სწორედ ის ადამიანი, ვისაც მე პირველად შევხვდი რამდენიმე წლის წინ და ის საუბრობდა იდეაზე, რომ საქართველოში შემოსულიყო ამერიკული უნივერსიტეტი და გაკეთებულიყო ის, რასაც დღეს ჩვენ ვახორციელებთ. ის გახლავთ შეიძლება ითქვას ერთ-ერთი ინიციატორი აღნიშნული იდეისა და ჩვენ როგორც საქართველოს ხარის წარმომადგენელი მე ძალიან დიდი მადლობა მინდა მას უთხრა ამისთვის, მადლობა იმისთვის, რომ სან-დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტი საქართველოს გვერდში დაუდგა, შემოვიდა ქვეყანაში და სთავაზობს ამერიკულ საბაკალავრო პროგრამებს საქართველოში. როგორც პროფესორმა ვოლშმა განაცხადა, უნიკალურია ის, რომ საქართველოში პირველად გაიცემა ამერიკული დიპლომი და ნამდვილად მინდა ყველას ვურჩიო, ყველა აბიტურიენტს, სტუდენტებს, ვინც დღეს ჩვენ გვესწრებით, ასევე თქვენი ოჯახის წევრებს, საზოგადოებას, რომ ეს უნიკალური შესაძლებლობა მაქსიმალურად გამოიყენონ. აქვე მინდა აღნიშნო, რომ სან-დიეგოს სახელმწიფო უნივერსიტეტი საქართველოში სთავაზობს ძალიან ბევრ საინტერესო აქტივობებს, როგორც პროფესორმა მალოემ აღნიშნა, მოგიწოდებთ, რომ შემოწმოთ ვებსაიტი, სადაც იქნება ატვირთული ინფორმაცია და ასევე მინდა მადლობა უთხრა ამერიკის შეერთებული შტატების ათასწლეულის გამოწვევის კორპორაციას და ამერიკელ ხალხს, რომლის მიერ გადასახადებიდან ხდება კომპაქტის დაფინანსება საქართველოს სტრატეგიული მხარდაჭერისთვის. მადლობა საგასაგებად.
Thank you very much, Magda. So it's my great pleasure now to introduce my friend and colleague, Dr. Stanley Malloy. I'd like to tell you just a little bit about him, so you have some sense of who you're listening to. So Stanley earned his PhD in molecular biology and biochemistry from the University of California at Irvine. He is currently serving as the Dean of the College of Sciences at San Diego State University. Stanley is a member of the American Academy of Microbiology and is a past president of the American Society of Microbiology. He's done work in industry and worked as an advisor to the government on a wide range of issues, including biosafety, biodefense, research, and health policy. And in his lab, he studies the evolution of microbial diseases and the development of new vaccines and antibiotics. And all of that might give you a picture of Stanley as a fairly dour and scientific guy, but I will also tell you that he is a great fan of poetry and is the poet laureate of the STEM fields at San Diego State University. So it's my great pleasure to turn it over to Stanley.
It's a great pleasure to be here. I have so many friends in the audience. It's really very, very nice. One of the things I love about science is that it really is a global enterprise. And it's so nice that you can go to so many places in the world and we share common interests and common questions. And it really makes the world in a small place. It's one of those kinds of things deep in my heart. I hope someday will lead to world peace. So I'm going to tell you something about global climate change and emerging infectious disease. And it's maybe something that many of you haven't thought about. I'm sure you've heard about climate change, just like we've heard about infectious disease, I'm going to explain to you why connecting those two is important. But I'll begin by saying that at our university, there are many scientists and mathematicians and computer experts that work on global climate change. In fact, the mathematics of global climate change, the statistics showing that it's real, was done by a statistician at our university. But when people talk about climate change, very often they say, this will happen in 2050, or this will happen in 2100. And we know that something that's that far off seems too far away to respond to. And psychologists tell us that that's probably why the world is not doing something to help solve climate change. So let's talk about that in a minute. I want to begin and tell you about emerging infectious disease. This graph is just the United States, but a graph like this exists for many countries. For Norway, for Switzerland, for Great Britain, for many countries around the world. And it's pretty amazing. This is the number of people who die per year for every 100,000 people in the population from 1900 on through 1980. Now, when you look at this curve, it's really an amazing success story in terms of how effectively we are at preventing infectious disease, right? Do you think this is due to antibiotics? I didn't warn you that I'm going to ask you questions. Is this decrease due to antibiotics? Partially. So you know when penicillin began to be used effectively in humans was 1944. Look, we've already had most of the effect. Is it due to vaccines? So vaccines started to be used more broadly around the 1930s, okay? The big decrease here, overall, that big decrease is because of better water supplies, clean water, right? By the way, what's this little blip right here? That's the Spanish flu. That was an influenza pandemic across the world. This is why we're so worried about another pandemic of influenza. All right. But look at this. The important thing is, by 1980, the number of deaths due to infectious disease had decreased so much that people started saying, we don't even need to work on infectious disease anymore. We should worry about other things like cancer and heart disease. And so people stopped working on these things. But as they stopped working on them, it became clear that we started seeing a whole bunch of new diseases we'd never seen before. And this is just my table that's put up. I start at 1993 and go up to around 2014. The lifespan of people in this room were about 21 years old. And each year you can find some new disease that had an important impact on people's lives. So there's a lot of diseases up there. But if you look at those diseases, what you would say, why? Why are we seeing these new diseases? Where are they coming from? And if you look at this curve, you look at the data, you can tell me where you think they're coming from. What do you think? Well, some of these things here, they don't say anything about water, but there is something that they all share. How about a student? Look at most of these come from animals, right? The majority of these come from animals. And if you look at new emerging new infectious diseases, almost all of them come from animals. In fact, when you look at human-specific pathogens, there are less than 100 of them that are known. Most of these new diseases either come from organisms that are out in our environment or transmitted to humans from animals. So then you can ask the question, well, why? Why are we seeing this now when we didn't see it before? And the answer to that is because humans have become so good at manipulating our environment. Changes in agriculture cause the presence of some of these diseases. Changes in where humans live in big cities has an impact. In some cases, we disrupt the environment and cause transfer of the disease to humans. In other cases, broad disruption of public health causes new diseases to rise. And in some cases, it's actually development of new towers, like cooling towers, that cause disease to happen. All of these things are done for the benefit of humans, and a secondary consequence is the spread of disease. And then one more factor that's very important here is climate change. So let's look at climate change. This is a plot of the average temperature across the globe, starting in 1880 up until 2005. And if you look at this plot, you can see that there's a fair amount of variation in the average temperature, but recently it's been going way up. Okay? The average temperature in 1914 was higher than it's ever been recorded. Now, this data is confirmed by a lot of different approaches. This is very solid data for the change in global temperature, for global warming over this period of time. But what I didn't talk to you about, look at this. Look at this axis. Those are tiny changes, right? So we're talking about a change of something on the order of 1.5 degrees around the world. Okay? 1.5 degrees. When the temperature changes by 1.5 degrees, we don't even notice it, right? So does 1.5 degrees matter? And is it something that only matters if we take this out for another 100 years so that we're talking about a big change in temperature? That's the key question. So what I'm going to give you some examples of is the real-time impact of climate change from those small temperature differences. In one case, we'll talk about how increased temperature affects the distribution of malaria, the parasite shown in that upper picture. We'll talk about how changes in ocean temperature cause the spread of certain pathogens, one called Vibrio parahemolyticus and the other cholera. And then we'll talk about how changes in the water cycle can cause spread of disease from rodents and spread of waterborne disease. Okay? Here we go. This is malaria. Malaria is spread to humans from an insect vector, the mosquito. And mosquitoes have to go through this complicated process in their life cycle to be able to transmit disease. A very important thing is that the speed at which a mosquito goes through that life cycle depends upon the temperature. And if the temperature is below about 10 degrees, the speed at which mosquitoes mature is so slow they can't spread disease to humans. But if you look down here at the temperature range, 1 degree temperature range between 17 degrees and 18 degrees is enough to change the development time of this parasite by on the order of 8 days. Now, if you change the time it takes to develop by 8 days, you decrease the transmission to humans by about 100-fold. Okay? Because you decrease the number of those parasites in humans. 1 degree temperature change, major effect on the spread of malaria. So if you do computer analysis to predict what this means around the whole world, this is a prediction of the impact of a 2-degree Fahrenheit change on malaria around the world. Right now, in the United States, we virtually have no malaria. That 2-degree change is predicted to cause malaria all along the south and east coast of the United States. But in Europe, it's also predicted to cause widespread increase of malaria all the way up into southern Sweden. Now, one of the things that's not shown here, because the data was not plotted, is up here by Georgia. White means that the data just didn't exist. But if you look at the predictions and what we know about malaria in Georgia in the past, the prediction is it's going to increase here as well. So that's a change due to the temperature on land. But the temperature of water is also changing, again by very small amounts, but clearly on the order of 1 to 2 degrees. So does the change in the temperature of the water matter? This is an organism, Vibrio parahemolyticus, that causes a very serious intestinal disease, okay, that people can often die of. Okay? Now, this is a bacterium that lives inside of shellfish, like oysters. Okay? But for this organism to grow, for it to cause disease, it has to grow, and the temperature has to be above 15 degrees. Okay? So in Alaska, far north, the temperature of the water there has been very cold, but over a period of time, now between 1997 and 2005, the temperature of water there has increased by roughly 2 degrees. There was no infection of Vibrio parahemolyticus in this region up until 2003. In 2003, the very first case ever and the biggest outbreak that had ever happened in the world. It could not happen before 2002 because the temperature was too low for that organism to develop. Here's another example. This is cholera, a disease everybody knows about. This is caused by a bacterium that lives in the water. It gets transferred to humans when they consume the water. It causes very serious diarrhea. That releases the organism back into the water and completes the whole cycle. This, by the way, somebody who has cholera gets put into something called a cholera cot because the amount of fluid they lose is so great that you can't take care of them any other way. And this picture, which is kind of faded, this is a guy that survived a cholera infection. See all of those bottles around him? That's the amount of fluid he lost from his body in 2 days. Okay? So you die of dehydration from this disease. This is an example of how water temperature influences the percentage of people that are infected by cholera. And this is a picture that comes from a bay off of India. This is the temperature of the water. This is the time of year shown on this side. And there's a little light line that shows the change in seawater temperature. And you can see that a change in seawater temperature of about 1 degree is followed by an increase of 5 to 10% more people infected with this disease. Very small temperature change, major impact on disease in humans. One of the other things that climate change does is it changes what's called the water cycle. That is, the ocean or any big body of water, evaporation occurs that seeds clouds with water that when they move over land, release that water as rain, it runs off, and so you have this natural cycle of water. As the temperature of the water increases, more evaporation happens. As the temperature of the air increases, more water can stay in the air. So the clouds become very heavily laden with water, and when they come to land, you get very serious rainstorms and flooding. When this happens, it causes a periodic change. So there will be a lot of rain and a big flood, separated by periods of drought with very little water. So you can ask this question of how does altered precipitation, altered rainfall, how does that affect infectious disease? Well, one of the things rainfall does is it provides more water where mosquitoes can grow, and so it will increase the spread of diseases like malaria. The drought that follows can affect the population of rodents and diseases transmitted from rodents, and both flooding and drought can influence fresh water supplies and increase waterborne diseases like salmonella. All right. One of the things I said in that last slide was that rodent populations can change when you have these periods of drought and rain. So this is from a region in the United States, in the southwestern United States, an area called New Mexico. And this was an example of a new disease that came about in 1994. This is what the region looks like during a drought. It's very dry, it's like a desert. In this period of time, they had abnormally heavy rains, and there was a lot of grass in that region. When there's a lot of grass, it has a lot of seeds, and the mouse population can increase very rapidly because of the amount of food. The mouse population increased very quickly. Those mice begin living in the human houses, and they transmitted a disease caused by hantavirus, resulted in lots of deaths in the region. This is an example of a disease that was entirely dependent on this cycle of drought and rainfall that we saw. By the way, hantavirus is a different kind of hantavirus. It's also prevalent here in Georgia, and so this is an example of how this can affect Georgia as well. Okay. Now, another thing I told you is that this process can increase the transmission of diseases like salmonella. Salmonella is my favorite organism in the whole world. Actually, so this is a story. I was teaching a course in Peru, in South America, and my son was in college, so I took him down to help me with my course. And we had a chance to do a public lecture, and someone in the audience asked me, "What's your favorite organism?" And I said, "Salmonella is the love of my life." So guess what happened to me that night? I got salmonellosis, and I was really sick. And I recommend for any professors that you don't take your son or daughter to to help you because they're very hard critics. I had salmonella. I was really sick, and my son said, "How much do you love salmonella now, Dad?" Salmonella has been with humans for a long time. In fact, we have evidence that salmonella caused disease in dinosaurs. But salmonella normally is associated with animal products. Chicken, beef, pork, eggs, fish, milk, cheese, chocolate, all things associated with animal products, and sometimes things associated with pets or animals themselves. This is how people got salmonella, right? This was the source of salmonella for many, many, many years. And then, around 1977, there was a big change. And all of a sudden, we started seeing people get infected with salmonella from plant products. The first type of plant product that you could show caused salmonella was alfalfa sprouts. Do people use alfalfa sprouts on sandwiches here in Georgia? Yeah? No? In 1977, in the United States, everyone decided they were very healthy. So every sandwich that you got, they put alfalfa sprouts on. Right? And then when they learned the alfalfa sprouts could cause salmonella, they said, well, it's because the salmonella is on the surface of the alfalfa sprouts. So they took the sprouts and they dipped them in bleach, and then they put them on the sandwich. And of course, the sandwich tasted really bad, but alfalfa sprouts taste so bad that people ate them anyway. But the thing is, people still got disease. And then it started being from a whole bunch of other plants. I don't think there is any animal or plant that you can eat that may not transmit salmonella. And this is a change. It's something we didn't see before 1977. And in my freezers, in my laboratory, we have salmonella that was isolated before 1977, and it can't infect plants. And salmonella isolated after 1977 from around the world, and now it can infect plants. So the real question is why? Why can salmonella now be transmitted by plants? A very important thing is that salmonella has learned how to grow inside of plants. On the leaf of plants, there are regions called stoma, and these are salmonella. You can see them going into the stoma. And these little green bits are salmonella in a plant, and you can see that it's actually growing inside of the plant. Okay? Salmonella can grow in plants. It could not do that before 1977. Not only can it grow in plants, but the way that it grows is active. It actually swims towards plants so that it can get inside and survive. And it only does that when the plants are undergoing photosynthesis. Okay? Now, the only other organisms we know that do this are plant pathogens. So, we think salmonella stole some of the genes from the plant pathogens to be able to do this. And you can ask why that happened. And what it looks like is that this started in the southern United States and northern Mexico, a region that's widely used for agriculture now, and it's a very dry region. You can't grow plants without irrigation. This region has a lot of droughts, and so what people started doing in this region to give the plants enough water was they had outhouses that collected human waste. And at nighttime, they dumped the outhouses into the irrigation ponds. Okay? Now what this does is it mixes the pathogens from humans directly with animal and plant pathogens. And because it's so hot in these regions, the only salmonella that survive are those that learn how to get inside of plants. So this selects for the evolution of this new trait in plants. And it's specifically because of the temperature changes, the drought and rainfall in this region of the world. I gave examples of a few diseases, but there are lots of other cases. Diseases transmitted by ticks are more examples. Lyme disease is important here in Georgia, like in the United States. It also has this effect. The Crimean Congo hemorrhagic fever is also sensitive to climate change. That's very important here in Georgia. Diseases that are transmitted by coughs, like tuberculosis and influenza, are affected by the amount of humidity in the air, so by climate change. And actually, Georgia is a region that has a lot of multi-drug resistant tuberculosis. So this is very important here in Georgia. Diseases transmitted by animals, like brucellosis and leptospirosis, other diseases that are important here in Georgia. And some diseases that are transmitted by things like mold that tend to be common in old buildings are very important and associated with these small changes in temperature that we see associated with climate change. So here's the basic idea. An increase in the temperature over land and water changes the amount of rainfall. You get storms and floods and drought. This causes contamination of water by these pathogens. It also increases the number and the activity of the vectors and the populations of animals that carry disease, like mice and other rodents. That results in diarrheal diseases, diseases transmitted by ticks and mosquitoes, and diseases transmitted to humans from animals. There is also very important real-time ecological impacts of climate change, because these diseases do not only affect humans, they also affect plants. So plant diseases are increasing as well. There's changes in organisms that live in the ocean that are dependent upon calcium shells. That's resulting in destruction of coral reefs around the world and a runoff of pollutants into water supplies that causes very serious health problems for organisms living in the water as well as humans. So here's the take-home point. Those small changes, the very small changes in temperature that have already happened because of climate change, are important. They're affecting our lives and the lives of people around the world right now. Not only 50 and 100 years from now, but right now. Now, that's just depressing. Right? So you say, what do we do about it? Right? If this is a problem, how can we solve a problem? That's what scientists and engineers do. Right? Some people thought they could solve this problem in an age-old approach. But the problem with that is we don't have an ark that's quite big enough to solve all of our world's problems. So we need a different kind of approach. Now, for everything that I've said, one of the things that's really important when we talk about human disease is that the amount of human disease is dependent upon the amount of animal disease and on organisms in the environment. These three things go together. Healthy humans require require healthy animals and a healthy environment, right? But when you think about the way we deal with these different kinds of things, we tend to separate them out. Somebody who becomes a medical doctor goes to medical school and they learn about humans. They don't learn about animals, right? Somebody who becomes a veterinary doctor learns about animals, but they don't learn about humans. God forbid they treat humans. Right? And people who study the environment typically are not involved in looking at human and animal diseases. So even though they're all important, this is the way we educate people, and this is the way we do research now. So there is an effort that's going around the world, including in some places here in Georgia, that's called the One Health Initiative. And the basic idea is to bring these different disciplines together so that we can get optimal health of humans, animals, and the environment. Now, it seems really easy, but to achieve this, we have to bring together people from many different areas of science, technology, and engineering to solve the problem. So bringing these people together is one of the big goals for the next generation of people who are going to help deal with these disease processes. Now, understanding the connection is a way of leading to a solution. Right? So this is what we do right now. If you care about human disease, you look for infected people, sick people, you investigate those sick people, and you treat the sick people. Right? What the One Health Initiative will do is allow you to do surveillance of the environment and animals to make predictions of where disease will happen, and then to prevent it before it happens. This is something that will allow us to respond to major problems that arise from the impact of climate change on disease. But we will only solve those problems if we have people trained in the right way. And that training involves people who understand DNA and genomics, who use technologies like GIS, computer ability to integrate large amounts of data to make predictions, analytical chemistry to detect small molecules that may be very important for us. What I don't have here is engineering. But every one of these techniques requires new types of equipment to be able to do these processes. And that new equipment comes from engineers who put it together. This is a key thing that we need if we're going to respond to this problem in the future. And I think in many ways, this provides a lot of opportunities for us to think about with the SDSU Georgia project. I've talked about a bunch of things, and if you would like to read any more about it, this is an advertisement for some books I did. This book came out in 2012, and these two books came out in 2014, and they talk about many of the examples and provide much more scientific data for the information that I've given you today. All right. What time is it? There's one other thing. Would you like to stay for 3 minutes and see a film? How many of you saw this movie, Contagion? One of the times I was here in Georgia, I was walking down Rust Valley and the cinema had this film on there. This is one of my favorite films. The person who is the scientific advisor for this film is a good friend of mine from Columbia University in New York. And this film talks about the spread of disease in the way that I just talked about. So I think it's about 1.5 minute clip. Let's look at that for a grand finale, for something fun. All right. This is dark because it's bats flying at night. Okay? Those are fruit bats. Bats nest in the pig pens and drop little bits of food from an infection. Those pigs are used for human food. You see that red part on the rump of this pig? That's what's called a hemorrhagic lesion. This is the chef that was helping prepare that pig. He just went and shook her hands. In the movie, that woman was the first case of a major outbreak of infectious disease. But this is a real story. In Indonesia, there's this disease in bats called Nipah virus. Those bats live in a place where normally there are no humans. But because the population density increased so much, they started building pig pens out in the middle of the jungle. And because the pigs like fruit, they planted fruit trees all around the pig pens. So the bats come in, they eat the food, they live in the pig pens, infect the pigs transmit this disease to humans. That was a disease that has existed for a long, long time, but only in bats. By our changing this environment, it brings this disease to us. It shows how sometimes humans doing something very important to build more food for the population can have a negative consequence. I'm not saying we shouldn't do those things. We need to do them, but we also need to detect disease quickly and treat the people with the disease if we want to have a safe world that really treats all the people fairly and uniformly. It was great fun talking to all of you. Thank you so much. And we're happy to answer questions.
Stanley, you got to get this picture off. There is a microphone available in the room. If you have questions, we'll be happy to try to deal with them. And we have to get the microphone to you, though, so that the translator can convert the question for us.
So let me just add that I'm happy to answer any questions about climate change and disease, but Ken and Magda can answer questions that relate to the SDSU Georgia project and the investments of the government and issues like that that you may also be interested in. So we can take any question you want to ask.
That was a pretty broad statement. Yeah. Okay.
Thank you for interesting presentation. I want to ask you, how do you think, as climate change is happening, some of new pathogens become active, but can we say that some of the old pathogens will decrease?
Yes, that's a really good question. In fact, it's very possible in certain cases that this is true. One of the amazing things, though, about microbes is that they adapt very, very quickly. And so the problem, the organisms that have a hard time making it are bigger organisms, like plants and animals. The microbes, because they grow so quickly, they can develop new traits very quickly. And so we don't see the microbes disappearing. We see some plants going extinct and other things like that.
Thank you.
I don't need the microphone, I can just talk loud. So how soon do you think the funding agencies will be to climb on board and develop programs that are sympathetic to this approach?
So the question was, how soon will funding agencies recognize the importance of this One Health approach and begin providing money that everyone needs to be able to follow up? Right? So it's beginning to happen in many places. The EU has begun making investments in this area already. The United States was slower to begin making those investments. I personally interacted a lot with our Congress to help them understand these issues. They're beginning to make the investments now. They're small scale compared to what's needed, but we're starting to see this. Some of the places where it's happening the most are in some of the poorest countries. And I think that's probably because in many of those countries there are closer interactions between humans and animals and the environment than there are in places where people live in big cities. So the poorest countries who have the least amount of money to invest are the ones who are investing the most money right now.
I think everybody's just trying to figure out what in the world can we possibly safely eat tonight.
Hello, my name is Salome. I'm maybe a future student of SDSU Georgia. What I want to know is that, so I'm really interested in investigation of blood diseases, and I really want to investigate these unknown diseases and create some treatment against them. So I need help from you. I mean, I want to know what should I study first, because I thought I should study human medicine so that I could know everything about these diseases. And I thought about biology in general, and about microbiology or biochemistry. So what do you think, what should I study and what should I start with so that I can get closer to this speed?
So I think that's a really good question. And to be honest, many different areas you can contribute in important ways to these problems. So for example, I mentioned that we need engineers who are developing new approaches to detect these types of diseases. We really desperately need people who are doing computer sciences who can take the data and turn it from a bunch of confusing data into something that we can understand. And we also need people who are actually doing the detection and developing new approaches to treat diseases. One of the things that is really clear nowadays is that to be at the front line of those areas, you have to understand molecular biology and biochemistry very well. So molecular biology and biochemistry are wonderful starting places to get the tools that you need to really make an impact in these areas. The second thing is If you have a degree in, for example, biochemistry, as an undergraduate, you can go to graduate school in many, many different areas that will allow you to expand on your knowledge and move forward. It could be graduate school in chemical engineering. It could be graduate school in microbiology or in genetics, or you name it. It could be then going on to medical school and combining the practical clinical knowledge with the knowledge that comes from these laboratory approaches. So I think that would be a great jumping off place. I also think it's a place where there will be many jobs in the future. Not jobs, careers. Right? And I say that in a very important way because jobs are something that you can do to make a living. Career, you make a good living. And you feel very satisfied in your contributions to society.
I wonder if I could just jump in for a quick second. I really want to compliment you because saying to yourself, I want to change the world, right? That's a great attitude to have, and that's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking for in our students. But more importantly here, to say, I want to change the world, and I'm thinking about trying to do it through the STEM fields, I think is a good recognition about the way the world is in the 21st century. So, my compliments to you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Kate. I'm a first year of bachelor degree in Tbilisi State University, Food Biotechnology. And I'm interested if you have a master degree program, because I can't study in bachelor degree anymore, I need master. And I'm very interested about this topic, and I'm learn about it.
It's a great question. And for an answer, I have to tell you that I have good news and bad news. The good news is that we have a lot of related graduate programs. Bad news is that right now we don't have them in Georgia. So the focus of this program is on the bachelor's degrees and bachelor's of science degrees across these STEM fields. We anticipate that in the long run we will see a need for master's degrees as our students want to go on and study more things, and we will probably make investments in that regard in the long run. And in addition, perhaps Maggie, you'd like to talk for a minute about other things that are going on to provide other avenues for study, perhaps.
I have one more question. If you have, I can study in Georgia about this program, but can I study like abroad? Do you have any grant programs for financing us or about master?
So thank you for a very good question. As Dr. Walsh has already described, the SDSU Georgia program project right now focuses on bachelor degrees, and that's where the MCC funding is put. There are other initiatives in the country not funded by Millennium Challenge Corporation, but there is a new initiative that is funded by private sector, we can say, and very soon STEM graduate school should launch in Georgia, where there is currently the phase of expression of interest from U.S. universities, and up to 3 various U.S. universities have already visited Georgia and have expressed an interest to offer their master's degree, graduate degree programs, not only masters but also PhDs. And I'm sure very soon the society will hear about those programs. These are not implemented by the Millennium Challenge Account Georgia or funded by MCC. These are separate, but I think you should know about this new initiative. Also, if you're interested to study abroad, as you know, the government of Georgia has, starting from last year, started offering scholarships or financial aid for citizens of Georgia who want to study abroad, and funding is available for graduate studies. So if you find a U.S. university, apply to, or foreign university, apply to the university, receive admission, you can go to the International Education Center
mention one other thing. Very commonly in STEM disciplines in the United States, PhD programs, the students are supported. And so it won't make you rich, but it's enough to pay for your apartment and your food. And the universities will typically also provide a tuition waiver for international students. So there are a lot of opportunities like that where you could go for a doctoral program. There tends to be less money for master's programs, but for doctoral programs, those opportunities are available. The really important thing, I think, for many of us in the United States is that if we do have students who come train in the United States, we really hope that they'll go back and serve their home country. And so that's something that really matters a lot. We don't want to be stealing people from other countries. We are very happy to help contribute to the training of people and the building of international collaborations across science.
Thank you.
Hear me without a microphone. I'm reading about the current bachelor programs here in 2015, and I have a question about your future plans, especially in science department. Do you have any plans, for example, for earth science programs, environmental or ecology? Because I think these are really important fields.
Yeah, thanks. It's a great question. The question was about other degree programs, aside from the ones that you might have gotten a chance to see on the brochures outside. Just not everybody may have those, so you know, starting in September, we'll have students studying electrical and computer engineering and in chemistry and biochemistry. And a year later, in 2016, we'll begin accepting students in civil engineering, construction engineering, and computer science. These are fairly broad disciplines that affect a wide range of industries, but certainly it's a small subset of all the fields that are available within STEM, and I think you rightly pointed that out. So the compact with the government of Georgia is expected to last up to 20 years. And the way that the model works is that we install these degree programs with our partner universities, and we develop faculty and laboratories and competency in those fields related to our curriculum. And we transfer that responsibility for those curricula to the partner universities over time. So originally, a lot of SDSU faculty are doing a lot of the delivery with assistance from our colleagues in the partner universities. Over time, that responsibility shifts to where our faculty are in sort of more of a supervisory role. And ultimately, those degree programs shift to become the responsibility of the partner university, and we help them to get their own accredited programs, and we quit teaching in those degree programs. What that does is allow us to consider new degree programs. We have a number of targets that we think about now, but over that 20-year lifespan, we anticipate there being something like 3 cycles like this, where we hand off to new degree programs. And when those come along, we'll be making assessments of what do we think are the best targets that have the biggest economic impact in Georgia, and that have the biggest demand from students, right? There's some combination of those 2 factors. And as I said, there's a wide range of degree programs that we're thinking about. It's a little hard to figure out what the crystal ball is going to tell us in a few years from right now, but I think that something that relates more directly to ecology and earth sciences and so forth is going to have to be within that portfolio over the short term, medium term, near term. Thank you.
I have one question. My name is Maria. I'm interested. Some days ago, I decided to apply for your program and do second bachelor in chemistry because it's my career. But what I'm interested in case if I have a research project, but I have no time to apply for second bachelor, and I need support of your library in USA, or if I also find it grants for this. I'm interested
opportunity to be a good partner with Georgia, both for the students who work with us, but also faculty and students in our partner institutions and more broadly across society. As a general rule, let me just say, I don't normally advise students to go get a second bachelor's degree because of the time that it's going to take. I normally advise students, you're going to go on to additional study, let's try to work out a master's degree or a graduate or a doctoral degree that makes sense for you. And we'd be happy to chat with you about how to do that, where it makes the most sense to do that, and to try to support you in that endeavor. But as we build our facilities here, those will include library facilities. We provide guest access to our libraries in San Diego. We anticipate doing the same sort of thing here. And so we will operate within the scientific community in Georgia, just like all the other universities and laboratories in Georgia. We've got to be a member of that community. We've got to be a good neighbor in that community. That's exactly what we intend to do.
So let me add another thing that has to do with funding for the research labs and for people doing research. So that's a place where our collaborations, research collaborations, can be very important, where together we'll be able to go for certain kinds of international grants that would be hard to get otherwise. So today, in my visits to other places around the city, we talked about opportunities for some faculty, both here in Georgia and in San Diego, for some major research grants that if we can get a grant like that, that will provide very important support for young scientists who are actually in the lab doing research as part of their career moving forward. That funding, this is just like the funding question earlier with One Health. You can have a lot of great ideas, but you have to have the funding to be able to put them in place. And so this is a reason, in addition to the education part, we really want to promote very strong research collaborations between our two countries.
Hello, thank you for coming today. So my question is, if I start studying in September, my guess is that I'll be able to get a diploma in 4 years. So do you have any other shorter programs that will, so I'll be able to get the same diploma in shorter amount of time, please?
There certainly are programs out there that run faster. Our general experience is that to really develop a deep understanding of a field takes a certain amount of time, takes practice and wrestling with that field over time and so forth. So our degree models are all built around the 4-year model, and that's what we anticipate offering here.
If I could just add something, a very important thing about the degrees that we're offered, they are internationally accredited. And that accreditation involves an agency that really specifies what things have to be taught and how they have to be taught. And so in the degrees that we're offering right now, you cannot complete the internationally accredited program for a degree in less than 4 years. If you have the accredited degree, it will allow you to get jobs for international companies where they will only hire people that they're confident have these skills that come with that type of degree. So there really is a benefit to putting the time in to getting this type of degree.
Hello, my name is Kwanzaa. When there is a debate or a discussion about the climate change, we often hear what governments or corporations or scientists can and should do, but I'm wondering what I can do to make a difference, taking into consideration that I don't have a science major. Thank you.
I think that's actually a really important question. So I was a child of the 1960s. So I often say I'm an old hippie. And one of the things that people said, a common statement was, if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. Okay? And the other thing is that great things happen because of many small things. So if each one of us does certain small things. Sometimes it can be a matter of walking up a flight of stairs instead of taking an elevator, or walking several blocks instead of driving. It may have to do with what kind of food you choose to eat. There are a lot of questions like that where it seems so small, but if you multiply it by all of us, it becomes very, very big in terms of consumption of fossil fuel. But there's one other thing that's very, very important that maybe none of you think about, right? And that is energy and water are tightly interconnected. To produce energy demands water for cooling, for many other things. And clean water demands energy. So these two things come together in what is called now watergy. And so one simple thing you can do to help the planet, help climate change, is to conserve water. And that's very, very important around the entire world, even in regions where water seems to be plentiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's take one more from the back.
Yes. As you mentioned, disciplines like electrical engineering and computer science are quite broad disciplines. Does your university offer a kind of open courseware or online open course to get acquainted with those disciplines and to make a choice whether I want to go the way or I want to go another way? Does that make sense?
Well, that's an excellent idea. So you will find on our website a lot of information about the different degree programs and sort of what their content is. Right now we don't have an open courseware architecture. There certainly are a lot of places that approach those in a lot of different ways. It's a great idea that we'll have to take